The Silver Age of comic books didn't end with a cosmic flash or an alien fleet filling the sky. It ended with a single, sickening sound effect that barely took up any space on the page. A tiny snap. From the top of the George Washington Bridge. In the spring of 1973, with the release of The Amazing Spider-Man number 121, the world of superheroes was shattered. This is the story of how the death of one woman, Gwen Stacy, and right away, she was different. She wasn't just a damsel in distress. She was smart, she was funny, and she was Peter's intellectual equal. He knows who Peter is, and he's not there to fight Spider-Man. He's there to utterly break Peter Parker. Spider-Man arrives at the bridge. The comic calls it the George Washington, but the art looks a lot more like the Brooklyn Bridge to see Gwen's life hanging by a thread. A brutal fight breaks out, hundreds of feet above the water. And then the Goblin does the unthinkable. He pushes her off the bridge. Did the shock from the fall kill her, as the Goblin claimed? Or was it the whiplash from Spider-Man's desperate last-second save that broke her neck? The comic itself leaves it agonizingly ambiguous. Holding Gwen's lifeless body, Peter Parker isn't a hero anymore. Before this, you just didn't kill major characters, especially not the hero's main love interest. It was an unwritten rule. This event is what many consider the definitive end of the Silver Age of comics. An era of optimism and black and white morality, and the start of the darker, more complex Bronze Age. Suddenly, stories had consequences. It was the death of an idea. It ripped away the safety net and proved that even our greatest heroes could face tragedies they could never really come back from. By killing Peter Parker's first love, Marvel forced him and the entire superhero genre to finally grow up. Comics proved they could be a place for deep adult tragedy, and they got darker, more complicated, a whole lot more human, all because of that one night on the bridge and the loss of Gwen Stacy. Real, permanent, devastating consequences. Nobody was safe anymore. The quippy, friendly neighborhood Spider-Man is gone, replaced by a man consumed by revenge. In the next issue, number 122, he hunts the Green Goblin down, not for justice, but for blood. Their final battle is one of the most vicious in his history, ending only when the Goblin is accidentally impaled by his own glider. But for Peter, there's no sense of victory. There's just ... nothing. The editor at the time, Roy Thomas, later acknowledged in a letters column that the intent was for the whiplash to be the cause. Peter's attempt to save her was the very thing that killed her. This wasn't like his Uncle Ben's death, which pushed him to become a hero. We saw it brought to life in that brutal scene from The Amazing Spider-Man 2. And it was the core of Andrew Garfield's heartbreaking performance in Spider-Man No Way Home. This was a loss that happened because he was a hero. Was killing Gwen a necessary, powerful step for Peter Parker's character? Or, as many critics would argue now, was it a classic example of Fridging sacrificing a female character just to create pain for a male hero's story? I'd love to know what you think, so let me know down in the comments. And if you enjoyed this trip through comic book history, please hit that like button and subscribe for more. It cemented the idea that suffering wasn't just part of Peter's past, but a constant in his life. The guilt from that night would follow him for the rest of his life, a constant reminder of his greatest failure. Death also changed the book forever, allowing Mary Jane Watson to grow from the fun-loving party girl into Peter's best friend, his wife, and the person who helped him heal from a wound that never truly closed. To do that, he targets the one person Peter can't live without. He kidnaps an unconscious Gwen Stacy and takes her to the top of a bridge, setting the stage for a nightmare. She became his first true love. Gwen was the calm at the center of his chaotic double life. He shoots a web line. It snags her ankle, stopping her fall just feet from the water. Right next to Gwen's head, as the web line pulls her back from the brink, is that tiny sound effect. Snap. For just a fraction of a second, you think he did it? He caught her? He saved her? But as he pulls her up, he realizes she isn't moving. The Green Goblin cackles, romantic idiot. The hero didn't just fail to save the day. His own action, his own heroism caused the tragedy. There was no right move. Was completely and utterly powerless. She was dead before your webbing reached her. A fall from that height would kill anyone before they struck the ground. For readers, their relationship was what the series was all about. The hope that this hero, who was defined by loss, could still have a bright, stable future. Didn't just break Spider-Man's heart, it dragged the entire genre out of its age of innocence and into a much darker, more dangerous world. Before this moment, you have to understand, superhero comics lived in a world that was, for the most part, pretty safe. He felt that Peter Parker had gotten a little too comfortable, a little too happy. And for great stories to be told, that comfort had to be destroyed. Sure, there was danger, but the status quo was always restored. The hero won. The city was saved. Norman Osborn, the man behind that terrifying mask, had been dealing with amnesia. He'd forgotten he was the Goblin, and more importantly, he'd forgotten that his own son's best friend, Peter Parker, was Spider-Man. And the girl was always safe in the end. And Peter Parker, despite the tragedy that made him Spider-Man, had actually found some real happiness. Under the immense pressure of his business failing and the emotional toll of his son Harry's drug overdose, Norman's mind snapped. The Green Goblin persona came roaring back to the surface, and this time it remembered everything. He had his powers, and he had Gwen Stacy. Gwen first appeared in The Amazing Spider-Man number 31. But the writer who had just taken over for Stan Lee, Gary Conway, saw things differently. The one to light the match was Spider-Man's greatest enemy, the Green Goblin. But all that was about to change. In The Amazing Spider-Man number 121, sick and exhausted Peter Parker returns to his apartment to find the Goblin waiting for him. What happens next is one of the most famous and heartbreaking moments in all of comics. Spider-Man reacts on pure instinct, but the art tells a different and maybe even more horrifying story. For decades, fans have debated what really happened in that panel. In that single moment, the most fundamental rule of being a superhero was broken. The aftermath is just pure grief and rage. Readers were absolutely shocked. The impact on Peter was immeasurable. Gwen Stacy's death still echoes through every version of Spider-Man we see, from the comics to the movies. But it leaves us with a huge question. The Night Gwen Stacy Died is still one of the most important and influential stories ever published. It wasn't just the death of a character.